Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
I really want to hear about pen testing. Welcome, everyone, to Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast. I'm Carolyn Woodard, your host. And today I am talking with our Chief Technology Officer and Cybersecurity Guru, Matt Eshleman, about penetration testing. So, Matt, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. It's great to be with you. My name is Matthew Eshleman. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Community IT. And in my role, I'm responsible for setting our cybersecurity strategy and also managing our team that supports our over 8,000 endpoints that we manage for our clients.
It's come up a couple of different times and in different cybersecurity webinars and podcasts. And I think what I am hearing is that you could do an assessment or you can do penetration testing. And we recommend usually that you do the assessment first.
Yes, that's correct. In terms of the priority of when you would do a penetration test versus some other kind of cybersecurity controls, what I've said for quite a long time is that, the penetration test really comes last. Because the penetration test, what it does is going to, in the best of cases, right, it's going to scan your local network, your on-premise network, identify vulnerabilities that you didn't realize that you had, and then, exploit them and kind of demonstrate to you how your network is still insecure. So that's kind of in the best of cases. If you still have a traditional on-premise network, maybe you still have a couple servers in your office, your organization is larger, right? You still have an on-prem or even a cloud server environment, right? The penetration tests are really designed they were built up to kind of assess, target, and exploit those kinds of traditional physical server network environment, right? And so in the best of cases, right, the pen test provider will often put a appliance on your network that has some sort of like customized version of Linux that has all these specialized tools that can scan and exploit and kind of do all this stuff on your local network. And, as a result, they will generate a very thorough report that says, hey, here's all the things that we did as part of our penetration test. We tried this, we tried this technique, all that we figured out, we found some credentials, we use those credentials to log into this network share. And then we did a search and then we found this information. And then, we set up a fake DNS server and then we spoofed somebody's account and then we stole your domain account, and now we're super admins on your network. So, so in that case, right, if you have a big network, you've invested a lot in proactive security tools, it can be really helpful to get somebody who's really focused on kind of quote unquote breaking into your network to show you what a malicious actor would do, and then you can usually implement some additional controls, maybe to tweak some settings. Update, some different policies to address, weaknesses. And then you get, you kind of get this really helpful feedback loop where somebody's actively testing your network. What we've found, as organizations have moved to the cloud, been more virtual, right? That traditional pen test, just isn't really relevant anymore. If you're an organization that, even if you do have a physical office space that people are coming to, if all of your IT services are in the cloud, right, there is no on-prem server, there's nothing really to test and to exploit. And so in those cases, right, the pen test people still have the same methodology, right? They will put something local in the network, they'll try to do some scanning, but there's nothing really to target. And in the same way, they will not in most cases, kind of quote unquote pen test or target Office 365 or Google Workspace. Like they're not going to kind of try to break into those systems, because one, like it's kind of futile. I mean, it's and two, like the rules of engagement, right, for targeting public cloud infrastructure, right? They don't want to run afoul of Microsoft or Google for kind of doing nefarious things and kind of getting blocked or doing some other things. So, the pen test as it has traditionally been offered doesn't really transition into our new contemporary world where organizations are smaller, they're virtual, everything's in the cloud. And so, the pen test requirement that shows up, right? We use Center for Internet Security as a framework for evaluation, right? It's recommendation number 18, right? It's at the bottom of the list. And you should keep it there because investing in other areas of IT improvement or cybersecurity controls, gives you the most value. And it kind of only after you've really exhausted all of the, improvements and policies and systems to protect your network, like then you may get value from testing it. But it's really kind of the last thing, the icing, whatever, the cherry on top after you've done all the other pieces to protect your network. So that's why I would advocate for, spending money, investing in your network is really important, but I would save that investment for a pen test until you've really done all the other things that are on your remediation roadmap.
I think you talked about it to me once before of if you do the pen test first, it's just going to show you the things that are missing that, you could have learned other less expensive ways.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, as part of our assessment methodology, we kind of have two different products, so to speak, right? So we have a core assessment, which we've developed. It's our best practices. It's really tailored towards small and medium-sized nonprofits, right? There's kind of 8 areas. It's very tactical, kind of a best practices view, like this, right? How are these things set up and configured, right? Those, that's where you could start. Moving up from there, we have our comprehensive assessment, which we do based off that, like I said, the Center for Internet Security, right? There's 18 control areas, 153 different controls to look at, right? Much more extensive. So that can be a big policy exercise. So there's a lot of policy questions that are part of that. In addition to, all the questions about, do you have a policy to govern inventory management or your data workflow, right? Those are all policy questions in the CIS framework. We also would typically deploy a vulnerability scanning agent to all devices in the network. And so that is helpful because it can scan the system, and then through those vulnerability scans, you can identify, these systems maybe aren't up to date on patching. Maybe there's a problem with the current patch mechanism, right? So we find out, operating system patching on these systems isn't working as well as it should. Or the vulnerability scanning agent will identify, there's out-of-date software, that is installed that may be able to be exploited. Or there's open ports, right, on the network. We see there's a copier that has an open port and somebody could log into the copier and see what people have saved locally. So all of those things are really helpful from the vulnerability scanning agent perspective. It can identify those weaknesses. In a pen test, they would kind of start with that vulnerability scan and then take the next step to exploit it. In our assessment, right, we're kind of identifying those weaknesses and presenting them. At the end of the day, right, you're probably going to remediate whatever vulnerability scan, whatever it reveals. The difference is in the pen test, they'll kind of go all the way to say, we found this vulnerability, we exploited it, and we extracted data or demonstrated that we could extract data. And so it is funny, like those extra couple steps end up being pretty expensive to do because it does require, specialized skill and training to do those kinds of things. But at the end of the day, from a remediation perspective, if you identify a vulnerability, you're probably going to remediate it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm glad you talked about cost, because I think that's another thing that comes up, is that the pen testing can be very expensive. And then, like just an assessment or assessment with the vulnerability scanning, as you were talking about, would generally be less expensive and would show you the same things that you need to correct before, so that you're not exposed. Can you talk just a little bit to wrap up about why is pen testing like such a buzzy word? Why do nonprofits come to us saying like, oh, I need pen testing. Can you help me set up pen testing? And how, I mean, we're trying to counteract that a little bit now, but why do nonprofits hear about it and think that they need it?
So I think a lot of it is rooted in those formal cybersecurity control frameworks that are really coming out of government or big enterprise, that say you must do this pen test thing, and so a little bit that kind of rolls downhill. And so for organizations that do have on-prem server infrastructure, I think it still is a helpful and relevant service to pursue. I think the problem is that pen test, right? It shows up as a recommendation, like you must do a pen test, and so everybody says, okay, so you just do a pen test to check the box, so to speak. But like I said, if you're an organization that's all virtual, that's all in the cloud, there's nothing to test that you can really get value out of. And so what we are seeing is that some of these security vendors have pivoted a little bit, so they will offer a configuration review. So they will look at your Google environment or your Microsoft environment or your Okta, whatever, and say, here's the best practices configuration, and here's the gap for what you should have, and here's what you do have. And so I think like those configuration reviews can be helpful. Again, they probably end up being a little bit less expensive. I think the other thing that kind of is appealing about the pen test is it I don't know, like taps into our desire to have this idea that, oh, like we need this super secret, super sophisticated assessment of our network, and it like looks cool, and they like use the command line with like green font, and it's like very it feels very, I don't know, hackery. And so like it has some like mystique about it, and I think because of the mystique, right, it can command a big price because it is really, it can be sophisticated. It's not really clear, what's going on or how they're doing it. And so, the price ends up being really high because it's hard to, distinguish one thing from another. And so I think there's a premium that gets charged for those pen tests. And again, I think it does tap into our desire to be like, oh, like, it validates that fear that, right, there's these hackers out there that are like trying to get us. And so, okay, now we have a report that, we paid somebody to do for us that kind of validates that fear.
Covers everything, that we can say we did everything. We had someone like actually break into our network, and now we know how they would do it. That makes sense. Is it also like cyber liability insurance? Do they sometimes have that on a checklist? And it's like, well, do we really need to do that?
So I think we're starting to see that. I think from a cyber liability, kind of insurance form, I'm not seeing that as like a required control, on every application. I think for some there are certainly requirements. I think probably depending on the size of your organization as well. I think that also, drives it. I think the insurance companies are really driven by their actuarial data to say like, okay, what are the factors that contribute to risk for organizations, and if you have on-prem server infrastructure with files and everything, like you're at a much higher risk for those ransomware attacks that cost money and are expensive to remediate. And so that that probably drives it in those cases. Again, if you are in conversations with your insurance broker and you're like, hey, like whatever, we're all in the cloud and we're using 2FA, and so
Yeah.
that's all a lot easier to protect against.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap it up, we would say if you are in a situation like what your cybersecurity status is, you have on premises equipment, servers that you need to be protecting, maybe often if you're in a larger organization. So you are aware of what your cybersecurity needs are in that case, and you can afford it. A pen testing might be a good way to like finish off doing a review. But if you are not aware of your cybersecurity status, you are all in the cloud. Maybe you're starting a cybersecurity journey. You want to know what you have, what you need to upgrade, what you need to change to protect yourself better. Start with an assessment.
Yeah. I mean, the assessment, is going to be more comprehensive and probably more targeted towards, providing a more kind of practical and developed roadmap. The pen test is going to be like very specific. It's going to be very technical. And, I think just, providing a slice or a window into the network that again is very technical, from a kind of a pure risk perspective, right? The most likely scenario that organizations are going to face is that somebody gets a malicious email that they click on and that they give their password away, or the credentials get stolen, or they're socially engineered out of, credentials or bank information or gift cards or whatever. And so like that's the most likely thing that's going to happen for most organizations. And a pen test doesn't address any of those things, right? It's, what changes do you need to make to your physical network infrastructure to make it harder for a hacker to target, right?
Yeah.
And those things happen for sure. But at community IT, right, knock on wood, or as a result of the networks we support and the proactive nature, right, we haven't had a ransomware case in our client environment for, I don't know, 6 or 8 years, right? It's a long time. But we definitely have compromised accounts, regularly. And, so we need to invest in where the risk is. So
choose your battles. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because there's no shortage of things to spend money on. And I'm not against spending money on cybersecurity solutions, but, you got to make smart investments for the limited IT resources that you have. And a pen test, again, can be a really helpful tool after you've invested in all the other areas.
Yeah. It can add value. We don't want to say it doesn't have value. It has a lot of value, but you want to match that to your needs.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Matt, so much for explaining it to us. That was very, very helpful. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.